Most national polls show Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden holding on to his edge over President Trump. But a look at data from swing states shows that the race is actually tightening in the final days. The latest Des Moines Register Mediacom poll has President Trump leading Biden by 7 points in the battleground state of Iowa. The president scheduled a stop in Iowa on Sunday. Biden visited the state on Friday before heading to Michigan. He focused on Pennsylvania for Sunday. Allison is the executive vice president of campaigns and programs for the Biden-Harris ticket, and she joins us now from Washington. Allison, good to have you with us. President Trump is returning to a strategy that worked for him in 2016. He's campaigning in 5 different states today alone, set to host 14 rallies in the final 3 days of voting. Is he outworking Joe Biden?
Absolutely not. The Biden-Harris campaign has a strategy where the vice president, Senator Harris, Dr. Biden, Doug Emhoff, Barack Obama, and many, many more surrogates are traveling all over to our 17 battleground states, hitting Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona. We are everywhere. And not only are the surrogates traveling, but the staff is working so hard, talking to voters. We have thousands of volunteers canvassing, doing lit drops, making phone calls, texting voters, speaking directly to voters. So we are leaving it all on the field. As the vice president says all the time, we're going to run through the tape so to make sure that the voters know what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would do if they elect them. And we are leaving it all on the field until November 3rd.
All right. Allison, Thursday's GDP report showed that the U.S. economy grew at a record annualized rate of just over 33% in the third quarter. These trends likely won't continue if the country shuts down further during the winter months due to rising COVID cases. So that leads to the question about what the Biden-Harris ticket will do about rising COVID cases and the economy. And President Trump today tweeted that Joe Biden would, quote, lock down our country maybe for years. I'm sure you're going to have something to say about that. But just more generally, is Joe Biden doing enough to reassure Americans that they will be financially secure if he's elected?
If Joe Biden is elected president, his experience will be consequential for this country. The president knew about this virus in February and did nothing to help the American people. Over 30 million Americans have lost their jobs to date. That's people who live in these battleground states, who live in California, who live in North Carolina, who can't put food on the table or keep a roof over their head because of the failed leadership of Donald Trump. Joe Biden has experience of getting our country back on track during the last economic downturn when he was elected vice president. But he has a plan. He has a plan for how we can reopen this country. But first, we have to get the virus under control. Millions of people have contracted this virus. Every day we're hitting new records of people who are dying from this virus. We need a vaccine. We need a plan. We need to wear our mask and not make fun of people like the current president does. So Joe Biden is pushing that message, letting people know. Senator Harris is letting people know he has a plan to get people employed, reopen small businesses, let kids be able to learn again. He doesn't want to shut down the country. He wants to get the country back on track. And as we say, build back better, get the virus under control, get our economy stable, and get back to how Americans live a regular everyday life. But under Donald Trump, that's just not going to be possible because he's not taking the virus serious and doesn't have a plan.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about coronavirus plans, Ashley. If Joe Biden has warned against rushing a vaccine rollout, if he wins the election, would that change the timeline for when a vaccine would be ready? And how should Americans feel about it?
Joe Biden is going to follow the science. Donald Trump dismisses science. He dismisses climate change. He makes fun of people who wear masks. We're not going to rush a vaccine, but we're going to make sure that it is safe, that it is tested, and that the scientists and the doctors believe. So we want to get back to our everyday lives just as much as I haven't seen my parents in months because of this virus. But it also isn't worth risking safety and health of the American people. And so we won't expedite the process, but we will follow the protocols needed, guided by the scientists, guided by the CDC, unlike this current administration.
That didn't really answer the question, though, about a timeline for the vaccine. Will that change the timeline for a vaccine being distributed to Americans if Joe Biden is elected president?
Well, we don't have a vaccine right now, so we don't want to project the timeline of a vaccine. What we do know is that we'll follow the science and we want one out as soon as possible. But right now, this current administration doesn't have a plan. If we can get a vaccine out that is tested and is approved by the science and the doctors, then we would get it out as soon as possible. But that isn't the case right now. And Joe Biden has experience in putting together a task force like he did under the Ebola virus, and making sure that we follow the protocol. So while we don't have an exact timeline, we're going to listen to the doctors, listen to the scientists, follow the protocols of the CDC, and make sure that Americans can get back to work in a safe and healthy way.
All right, Ashley, I want to talk to you a little bit about Iowa. It's been considered very much in play this year, but the latest Des Moines Register Mediacom poll shows that President Trump is now leading Joe Biden 48 to 41%. The same poll found that the candidates were tied at 47% just in September. The data shows Biden losing support with independents and women in the state. How much are you concerned about these numbers, and what are you doing to reach out to those types of voters in the final days?
Well, we look at the polls, but we don't fully rely on them. Polls aren't people. We are talking to voters. We are talking to the people that have either cast their ballot. Already, we have seen record amount of turnout. The exciting thing also about this is that there are so many states that are in play. We have Georgia in play. The last time a Democrat has won Georgia was in 1992. I couldn't even vote then. And so we are in North Carolina and Florida. And so while we are also doing a lot of work in Iowa, we have a very expanded map of 17 different battleground states talking to voters. So we think the voters will show up, continue. There are a couple of states who are voting early today. We think that we'll see great turnout on Election Day to match the trend that we have already seen over the course of the last couple of weeks when Americans have been able to vote early already.
All right, I want to talk to you about another battleground state, Pennsylvania. President Trump has been using natural gas and fracking as a wedge issue against Biden. On Saturday, the president signed a symbolic memo in support of fracking, which he says would be banned if Biden were to be elected. He called Biden's platform a, quote, economic death sentence for Pennsylvania. That's according to the president. So what is your response to this?
Well, what the president is saying is simply not true, just like so many other topics that he doesn't tell the truth on. Joe Biden has made it very clear to the people of Pennsylvania and in this country he won't ban fracking. But he will do the work that he needs to do to make sure that we have clean energy jobs, to make sure that we can get Americans back to work. Pennsylvania is a critical battleground state. We've traveled to it many times. There were thousands of volunteers talking to voters just yesterday, and we'll continue to do that through the next 2 days before Election Day and even on Election Day. So Joe Biden, let me make it very clear. Joe Biden will not ban fracking. Joe Biden will not raise taxes for people who make less than $400,000. Again, and so it doesn't matter the lies that Donald Trump wants to say about Joe Biden. We are telling the truth. We are talking directly to American voters. And I think that on November 3rd, you will see that they believe Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Ashley, your campaign looks like it's in strong shape. The polls are looking good for you in most of the battleground states. But, you know, we were in that same place just 4 years ago where it looked like Hillary Clinton, according to the polls, was in very strong shape. So before we let you go, I want to know what happens if Biden loses the election. What will be your message to Americans then?
We are not thinking about if Biden loses the message. There are 2 days for voters to still engage in this democracy. We are going to travel across this country. I run the coalitions department, and part of what that is making sure we talk to every single voter possible, meaning Republican, Independent, and Democrats, women and men, LGBTQ folks, Black folks, brown folks, Indigenous people, letting people know in this country that in a Biden-Harris administration, they have a voice and they can hold them accountable. That if they elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you will have someone that is honest, that is compassionate, that will tell the truth, that is reliable, and that most importantly has a plan. So we're going to be focusing on the next 2 days, talking to as many voters as possible, getting as many volunteers out there as possible. The candidates will be traveling across this country, talking directly to the American people. And what we're prepared for on November 3rd is record turnout, people saying that they are tired of the last 4 years of Donald Trump's lies, division, and deceit, and that they want a new path for America, and that is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
All right, Ashley, Allison, thank you.
Thank you for having me.